my family. My mother had always warned me that in your 20s, it'll probably hit. And she started warning me about that probably around 12. She was like, just so you know, so always communicate with me how you feel, because this will happen to you. You will, it happened to me, it happened to my mother. Um, and my mom is, out of all her siblings, was always very communicative. Um, she was always the one that was very aware of herself and aware of kind of her family and the things going on with them. So she, as far as those kind of deals like mental health and realizing that this is within us, that's how she would say it. This is within you. So about 21. So like everyone does, I was okay for a while. I would have stints maybe in high school just a little bit, but not anything that I noticed. So, foolishly, I just felt over the moon for this dude, just ridiculous. Just ridiculous. And it was a trigger. I mean, I guess that was the trigger. And so I started going to therapy then and just talking that out and realizing that really the way I felt had nothing to do with him and everything to do with, childhood and my relationships with men and my relationships, in the home and with my father and with my mother. And so I went for a few years that stint. Um, and then toward the end of graduate school, went back. Um, just felt like I was spinning, and I was. It felt very manic. A little bit after I graduated Mills, for a minute I thought, I was like, this feels, again, trying to be aware and try to be ahead of it, felt very almost bipolar in a way, very manic, very reckless. Um, and so went back and was okay for a while. Went back for a couple years, and so then kind of stopped. And then shortly after I met Justin, everything came to the surface, because that was like my first real healthy relationship, and so everything bubbled up. All my insecurities, all my crazy. So I was already kind of at a 10, and kid you not, bullshit you not, I've been smoking weed since I was 15, ate half of a brownie, and lost my goddamn mind. In the way that um, opened up and a lot of kind of repressed things. And I remembered a lot of things that maybe I had been back in my mind, some sexual abuse and things like that. And so then I started going full time. It started an OCD. I that's when my OCD kicked in, and so it was bad. It was really bad. A lot of anxiety, a lot of just ruminating thoughts. Um, and this is why you need Black folks in healthcare. So I had a young white woman as my psychiatrist. When I tell you, in that year, she tried 13 different drugs on me. 13. Because I would try them, and I would be at I would be at the appointment, and she'd be flipping through the book like, oh, well, this does this. And I'm like, and in my mind, I'm like, she doesn't look much older than me, and she's flipping through a book. And so I'm already like, this doesn't feel right. So what would happen is I would take the medicine and I would get really frantic, because even though I have depression, my spirit is happy. My spirit is one of energy and loving to be around people. And so I would get really, especially at night, I would spin. And so I would send her these emails like, this medicine is not working. And I kid you not, she just was like, I can't help you anymore. After that year, 13 medicines, she was like, I can't help you anymore. I don't know what to do. So I had this I started going to this amazing therapist, who was running a group, because I just cold turkeyed the last of the medicine I was on. I cold turkeyed it and was like, she can't help me, which never cold turkey psych meds. It was terrible. Um, and but it was terrible in that there were physical side effects. The medicine she was giving me was literally doing nothing, and I was just gaining weight. Already a big woman, it was just like I could eat rice, I could eat fish, boiled fish, and put on 5 pounds. So it was really doing nothing, and so she just was done with me. I got another doctor who, on the first visit, gave me. I had researched the medication she gave me, which had a high suicide rate, and she told me never. And I said, "Well, what if I want to have kids? You know, I have a boyfriend. We're serious. You know, I was getting close to that time to wanting to get married and all this stuff." She said, "Don't worry about having kids. That may not be for you." Um, and I was with my mom at that point, and she was like, "Okay, well, we're done. So we're just not going to do medications." And so I had already cold turkey the medicine. I was getting stronger. I was in the group therapy. I was writing more. Justin was very supportive. My mom, I had both of them kind of insulating me. And that just speaks also to the power, too, of having a support system. And even my dad, who has had his struggles with substance abuse, was like, "Oh, she's just withdrawing." Like, you know, even he could, could make me laugh about it at times. And so um just decided to take it in my own hands, and that doesn't work for everybody. I literally was insulated by the people who loved me, friends and family, um and it doesn't work for everyone. I self-medicate. I smoke weed at night before I go to bed, just like I would take pills at night, and that works for me. I know what strains to use. I've had to do a lot of research. I've had to listen to my body and listen to the cues that it gives me in my mind. And that's how I have medicated, and also how I have just through therapy worked through it. That is where I'm at in my growth. So
Thank
that's been
you.
great. Yeah, no worries.
So you're currently not on medication anymore?
No, it absolutely did not work for me. It absolutely, and I tried the gamut. I tried antidepressants, antipsychotics. I mean, I've tried, and I was trying things that, like, at one point, like, hardcore drug users were like, "Why the fuck would somebody put you on that?" Like, at one point, I was taking Seroquel, um, Geodon. Like, those are hardcore drugs for somebody with an anxiety issue.
Yeah.
Um, those are really hardcore. I think the last one was like Zyprexa. That's where I got a huge, like, just, I mean, ridiculous. And so it just wasn't working. And we it was funny. We went to Monterey, and this was like, "I know you." It was like that moment out of Fright. Like, "I know you don't smoke weed anymore. I know you don't. Just hit this one time. You might feel better." And I did, and I did, and that was it. And that's when he actively worked with me so that we could see, what strains. Maybe you just need an indica strain that puts you to sleep and kind of re-energizes for the next day. And that is exactly it. And that's how I do. So no medication. No.
That's what's so disappointing about the mental health field is that they over medicate
Oh,
so,
way over medicate.
especially with black and brown folks. Um, and it's just like they don't want to do the work of actual true therapy. They'd rather just throw pills at it. And like
Or
I'm not, hmm,
or it's an experiment. Like, I just always feel like we're a constant experiment when
mm-hmm,
it comes to when it comes to the health field. It's a constant. Well, we've never tried this on anybody, but let's try it on this big black woman. She could take it. Like, that's always the feeling to me. Like,
yeah,
it's always like an experiment. The only positive experience I've had with healthcare has been in having my son, and I
mm,
think that I just hit them at the right time. They're trying to regroup, and that was the positive experience. But mental health, um, great therapists. If they're and honestly, if they're black or Asian, that was it. Like, everybody else, I need that. But yeah, I always just feel like we're an experiment.
Yeah. And then, sorry, I'm tangent, but um, my first job out of grad school was with this program that worked with victims of violence through Hahnemann Hospital, what was Hahnemann Hospital here in Philadelphia. And so I saw folks that had been shot, stabbed, and assaulted. And so we had access to the emergency room and the ICU and all these things. And, you know, we connected a lot with some of the doctors and nurses and stuff. And there's a term that they use, which is treat 'em and street 'em, and it's for especially for folks that don't have insurance. So if somebody comes in with a gunshot wound, they'll treat them, patch them up, let them go that same day. And so like, and even one of my client, or he was going to be a client, but he was like, he was talking about his experience, and they were making jokes about it, but he was talking about his experience after he told them that he didn't have insurance. And he was like, it was vastly different. Like they were like throwing medicine at me. Like he was exaggerating a little bit, but just the fact that he could tell there was a difference in how he was treated versus, you know, when he said when they didn't know if he had insurance or not versus when they knew he did not have insurance, and how he was negative, like it was a negative effect. So anyway, tangent. You have questions? I don't even know if we answered any
No,
of
I
them.
mean, it all, I mean, the thing is that it all overlaps, right? But before we jump into like, you know, the other things that I want to talk about around like, you know, people having this idea that Black folks and people of color have a higher pain tolerance, and, you know, bringing up the whole experimentation thing. Before we talk more about that, Marvin, I know that some psychologists and some psychology professions require practitioners to get counseling themselves. Is that something that is part of your work, or have you always been doing psychotherapy by choice?
So out of, you know, I earlier talked about kind of the different areas you can go in with social work. So I didn't know. I knew I wanted to do therapy, but I didn't know who I wanted to do therapy with, or children versus adults, or I had no idea. It was kind of just like, this sounds cool, I'm gonna try this out. And so for me, and in the field of social work, and I think all mental health professions, therapy isn't required. So it's not required for therapists to go to therapy. My personal opinion is that therapists absolutely should go to therapy. It should be a requirement that we go to therapy. That has been such a significant part of my growth. And, you know, I was like, when you all were saying something happens and then you kind of go from there, I never had that. So I had to go on my own, and I never had parents that were like, yeah, go to therapy. It was just kind of like, we don't talk about it. And so, you know, when you feel it, when you feel your body feels different in a bad way. And so it's like, shit, I need help. I don't know what's happening with my body and my brain and emotions, but like, I need to figure this shit out. And so, you know, through my process, and granted, I had some white therapists first, who I was able to bullshit because I'm a good bullshitter for them anyway. And also there was a lot more explaining that I had to do, that I wanted, about how to navigate the world as a Black man. And so the best therapist I've had so far, excluding my current therapist, was a woman through Drexel who was actually a student, who was actually a doctoral student, but she was a young Latina woman, and she was fantastic. Like there weren't things I had to explain. She like gave me real talk. She called me on my bullshit, and I was just like, damn, well, okay, let's do some work then. But you know, through, you know, the therapeutic process, like I've been able to unpack stuff from childhood. I've been able to unpack like my own issues with self-confidence and self-worth. Been able to unpack like my own identity and like sexuality. I'm a queer bisexual man, by the way. Would not have been able to say that last year this time as confidently. So like, let's go.
Bye too.
Let's go. Yeah, so it's, you know, it's just helped me be way more comfortable and confident with myself. Yeah, I mean, I can't praise my therapists and therapy in general enough, and I hope I'm doing that same thing for folks too.
really inspiring. All of it. And, you know, I know that like it took the death of George Floyd and you know, the massive, like, historically global response to it, to seeing it on video, and to kind of bring us to this point, because people have normalized it so much, and people have gotten numb to it, at the same time as having this, like, could be American or Australian, really, this sense of cultural amnesia, especially if you are identified as white or identify with whiteness or have some kind of proximity to whiteness. The really confusing thing that I've come across, and I know that this won't come as any surprise to you, but people's desire to have proximity to Blackness, but then also have access to white privilege. I really want to kind of delve into not just Black Lives Matter, but specifically why all of us are committed to specifically Black feminism throughout our activism and advocacy work, and how that is now being, how we have the opportunity to think about changes in the world and in people's consciousness, but like keeping in mind our roots in Black feminism and what we've learned from it and how we're applying it. So anything that you have to say around those issues, I'm open to, you know, just leaving it open-ended. And, you know, obviously the opposite of Black feminism is white feminism, which doesn't work for that many people.
So I guess I'll start. So I feel like this has just been literally, for me, in my experience, I think people say intersectionality. Intersectionality to me is almost like, and we all say it, but it's almost like saying like trying to kind of blanket it. I hate using the term PC it. I hate that, because to me, when people say you're being PC, no, I'm being a decent human being. But it's almost like when we say people of color, because we don't want to necessarily individualize, especially like when Black folks are talking about Black issues and they say people of color. No, you mean this is a Black issue, right? So that's what intersectionality sounds like to me, especially when I hear it from white women. Because usually the person saying it doesn't practice it, right? And that's the problem. And so I'm always, whenever me and my friends, me and my peers, we talk about feminism, I always make it clear to them, like, your feminism is not mine. And we need to, and if you want to know more about that, let's talk about that. My feminism, first of all, I've got so many layers to my feminism, which is, number one, I've got to even be a person. Number two, then I've got to be a woman, because so far throughout history, Black women have been treated as men, and meant to work as men, meant to operate as men, but yet still give birth, still make babies, still make slaves, still be able to operate in the dualism as man and woman. And so it gets so far into it that white women are just, whenever the conversation of feminism comes up, they're just like, I want to make sure that I'm equal to a man. Well, hell, I'm just trying to get equal to you. I'm trying to just be equal to you. And this came up on a job I had when I worked at and you ain't got to bleep this out because I hope they hear it. When I worked at the Workforce Development Board, and I had a really abusive manager who was abusive to all of us. But the way he was abusive to me, there was a white dude, a Latino dude that really found his proximity to whiteness, a Chicana woman, and myself. Now, he was abusive to all four of us, but he was abusive to me like he was abusive to the men. And so it was very physically confrontive, and one day I called and said, you would never hem up another woman the way you're doing to me. And I know it was because I was a big Black woman, that he felt that he didn't see my femininity. And that's what white women don't understand. First, nobody's even half the time seeing my femininity. And then I've got to argue with you about trying to get Bob's salary. I'm not even getting your salary or your proximity to management or getting getting the boost that you're getting. You know, I think we talked about this, where I had, besides the third level manager, I am the only person in my unit with an upper level degree. I am the lowest one on the totem pole. Someone who literally worked for me, was my subordinate, is now a level above me. So that's what white women do not understand about feminism. They say, "Oh, well, these things." No, my stuff has so many layers. Like, and they're so quick to quote that poem, "Ain't I a Woman?" What she's saying in there is that I have to operate as a man, I have to operate as a woman, I have to do all of these things. Like, ain't I a woman? Ain't I a woman like you are? Ain't I a woman like the women that you revere are? And the answer is always no. And so that's why my feminism is different. I got different things, and I relate to my men differently. I relate to white men differently. I relate to Black men differently. My relationships operate on a whole different trajectory because of the simple fact that I am a Black woman. As a white woman, your relationships are going to operate in the same way because you're at this pinnacle. You're the white woman. My relationships are going to operate totally different. They operate in no matter what race I date, which I have dated them all, I'm going to attract a different type of dude within each of those. So it's just got so many layers. So feminism does not work for me. I don't subscribe to it in the way that white women do because it's a lot of things they don't understand. And white feminism forgives a lot of white patriarchy.
It forgives white supremacy.
White supremacy. And but it punishes Black male patriarchy. Like it's very selective. It gets very selective. I remember having a conversation with a friend, and she is a friend and I love her dearly. And she said, well, it was that question of why are Black people voting for Biden? They should be voting for Elizabeth Warren, which I know a lot of Black folks that did vote for Elizabeth Warren. I wasn't one up. I voted for Biden. And I got my reasons. And she was like, well, I just don't understand. And it just feels so, it doesn't feel progressive. And I had to stop her and I said, every movement that you have began with some Black folks struggle. Every movement. And then, but your husband didn't vote for her. So he voted for the man. So he's not progressive either. So think about that. And I have no problem. If we friends, if you're a white person and you're gonna be friends with me, you're gonna get the real. Or we just ain't gonna do it. I mean, you can take it or leave it, but I don't even code switch anymore. It doesn't serve me. I used to do it. It didn't get me any further. So I figured the same Jessica you get at home, like this Jessica is the same one that shows up to the Zoom meetings for the office. Like this is that same person because it didn't serve me to do that. And so if you're friends with me, you're gonna get that conversation. And if we really friends, you'll stop and think about it. And that's where Black and white women become friends. It's not, I don't stop being friends with you because you say things like that. I stop being friends with you when you can't take a step back and say, oh, okay, you know what? Let me think. You're right about that. Or I might have misspoke. Or you're right, your experience is different. It's the acknowledgement that can make us friends. So that's where white feminism and Black feminism are two different things. And I think that it's painful for a lot of white women to take that.
Well, they think that white feminism is universal. So they're not even used to, like I talked to a new friend who did turn out to be the kind of person you're describing, who's flexible and can be told off and come back to you and be like, okay, now I know something that I didn't know before. But
I didn't think I was telling her off.
But I'm like, you're a white woman. And she's like, I'm not used to putting white in front of my words. I'm like, well, that's you, but that's you. And I don't know what white women have, what business do they have even talking about intersectionality? They only have that one intersection of oppression anyway. So intersectionality is, you know, and Australians, what they do is they just take all of the words that have come out of African-American struggles in the United States, and they just copy and paste them to the Australian struggles, and most of those are just white people being cranky about immigration. But like, you know,
because for them, when you subjugate people the same way, but people don't experience subjugation in the same way. That's the understanding.
And then you see people, and then you like
in a different way.
People don't even intersectionality that came out of ethnic studies and cultural studies in the US is literally just the analysis of our multiple oppressions. It is not the problem itself. People are like, oh my God, fuck intersectionality. I'm like, you're just saying fuck analysis. That's all you're doing. Multiple oppressions.